In several Masters of the Air air-to-air attack sequences, it looks as if bomber gunners are engaging enemy fighters with friendly aircraft visible beyond their line of fire. That raises a natural question. How often did bomber gunners actually hit other bombers during combat? This updated look keeps the same facts and flow as my original, while refreshing the language. Wartime bomber groups flew in tight, disciplined formations. Those formations evolved as German tactics and threats changed. A declassified 1945 tactical doctrine, B-29 Combat Command document, titled Gunnery and the B-29, the Tactical Use of Equipment, frames formation design around three competing priorities. First, the primary mission is to put a concentrated pattern of bombs on target. Second, formations must remain flyable. Spacing and vertical stacking are arranged to reduce pilot fatigue, and the lead aircraft sets speed, altitude, and course. In fact, the formation leader is the only plane permitted to use autopilot. Third, the formation should maximize defensive gun coverage. No single formation can optimize all three. Trade-offs are unavoidable. A huge, ultra-tight formation is excellent for bombing accuracy, but it's harder to fly and easier to attack. Conversely, a vertical stack that best protects against fighters won't work during bomb release and is impractical to maintain. Crews had to function as a team, engaging attackers while avoiding fire on other ships in their own box. By late 1943, the 8th Air Force began blind bombing and, anticipating the arrival of long-range escorts, restructured its standard formation. The 54 Aircraft Combat Wing gave way to the tighter, more manageable 36 Aircraft Combat Box. Ammunition loads varied by model. A 1945 Army Air Force's Technical Service Command document, Tactical Planning Characteristics and Performance, lays this out. For B-17s, the tables list model and block number, number of guns, rounds per gun, and gun station type and location. The final B-17G carried 5,240 rounds. The bomber's primary defensive weapon, the Browning 50 caliber M2 machine gun, is profiled in a 1944 Aviation Training Division manual, Air Crewman Gunnery Manual. The M2 cycles at roughly 750–850 rounds per minute, up to about 14 rounds per second. Its lethal range extends to around 4 miles. But a 1945 U.S. Air Force Historical Studies report, Flexible Gunnery Training in the AAF, emphasizes that for flexible iron-sighted bomber guns, the practical maximum effective range is about 600 yards. Within a combat box, other aircraft are well within both the effective and lethal envelopes. Because lethal range stretches so far, formations were also spaced so that stray rounds from one box would be unlikely to reach another. Training syllabi stressed sighting and recognition, as shown in course tables where those subjects are called out explicitly. So how often did gunners hit friendlies, or even their own aircraft? B-17s, B-24s, and B-29s used turret fire interrupters designed to prevent shooting parts of their own airplane. One example is the B-17 ball turret follower interrupter, with defined propeller protection sectors. These systems, however, did not shield landing gear or bomb bay doors when those were extended or open. Waist gun installations were also positioned and limited so that a gunner's field of fire wouldn't intersect his own wing, something you can see in footage of a B-17F. All of this reflects a strong emphasis on avoiding self-inflicted damage. The U.S. Army Air Forces analyzed where bombers were actually getting hit. A 1944 report from Headquarters, 8th Air Force on Combat Losses and Damage, documented each returning aircraft's holes by location, direction, source, and severity. Across roughly 25,000 bombers, this created a detailed database. A 1947 U.S. Air Force Historical Studies document, The Combined Bomber Offensive, January 1 through June 6, 1944, summarizes the results for both B-17s and B-24s. In that period, the largest source of damage was ground artillery, flak, which accounted for 83.7% of all recorded damage incidents. Air-to-air rockets, aerial bombs, and 30mm cannon hits together made up a very small share, about 0.1%. Enemy aircraft 20mm cannon fire contributed 4.5%, while enemy aircraft machine gun fire added 2.4%. German fighters typically mounted 7.93 mm or 13.7 mm machine guns. Friendly .50 caliber hits accounted for 2.0% of bomber damage, and self-inflicted machine gun fire another 1.4%. Damage from falling empty shell cases and links made up 3.8%, and 1.5% fell into other or unknown categories. Based on this study, friendly and self-inflicted machine gun bullets together represented about 1.6% of the damage sustained by returning aircraft, small compared with the overwhelming impact of flak. The report also notes that when enemy opposition was heavy, up to 20% of all machine gun hits could be either self-inflicted or friendly fire. Waist gunners striking their own horizontal stabilizers was a notable driver of self-inflicted damage. What about friendly fire from escorts? While fighters often operated within the lethal range of the bomber formation's guns, the risk to bombers from their own escorts was considered low. Escort fighters typically engaged the enemy before the intercept could develop around the formation. That said, fighter units worried about being misidentified by bomber crews, as described in a 1945 History of the 8th Air Force Fighter Command from the 66th Fighter Wing. Bomber gunners couldn't take chances. The rule of thumb was simple. If any fighter points his nose at you and is within range, open fire. Similar identification concerns cropped up with naval forces during D-Day. There was significant worry that Allied ships might fire on U.S. fighters over the Channel. One reason P-38s were tasked with ship protection was their unmistakable twin-boom silhouette, which was hard to confuse with any German type. This is noted in the 1944 8th Air Force Tactical Operations in Support of the Allied Landings document. Crew casualty data track closely with the airframe damage picture. A 1962 U.S. Army Surgeon General report, Wound Ballistics, lists causes of 8th Air Force bomber crew casualties among returning airmen. Flak again dominates at 86.2%. 20mm cannon shells account for 3.9%, machine guns 6.2%, secondary missiles 7.8%, and unknown causes 1.5%. Secondary missiles include fragments of plexiglass, airframe pieces, bullet-resistant glass, electrics, and even .50 caliber ammunition cooking off. The distribution between aircraft damage and crew wounds follows the same general pattern. Flak is far and away the primary threat. Friendly fire concerns didn't end with Europe. During the transition to nighttime, low-altitude firebombing in the Pacific, 21st Bomber Command weighed the risk of bomber-to-bomber fire carefully. A 1945 report, Analysis of Incendiary Phases of Operation, March 9–19, 1945, concluded that the greatest hazard on night missions was friendly fire. For the March 9th Tokyo raid, B-29s were ordered to remove all ammunition. On the follow-on Nagoya mission, tail guns were reloaded but to be used only if fired upon. For the next Osaka mission, lower turrets were loaded with instructions to engage only ground targets, such as searchlights, or targets at lower altitudes. To sum up, friendly machine gun fire represented a small fraction of total airframe damage, and appears to have contributed similarly little to crew casualties. The documents don't provide a specific percentage for friendly fire crew wounds, but it likely tracks the airframe figure, around 2%. It's also hard to imagine many scenarios where self-inflicted machine gun fire would injure one's own crew. Remember, These statistics come from returning bombers, so survivor bias is inherent in the data. When friendly fire did occur, it was more likely from other bombers than from escorts. And if you were flying Escort, one practical lesson stands. Don't point your nose at a bomber formation unless you want every gun in the box looking back at you. If you found this updated analysis useful, please consider commenting, liking, or subscribing to the channel for more content on U.S. World War II bombers.